Nothing says I love you like being on the wrong end of a speakerphone call with your soon-to-be ex and her cackling coven of suburban witches. That's exactly where I found myself on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, but ended with my entire world flipped upside down. My name is Ethan Doyle, and I'm a 39-year-old IT project manager who thought he had life figured out. Married to Megan for 12 years, father to two beautiful daughters, Lily and Ava, and living in what I believed was marital bliss in our cozy suburban neighborhood. Boy, was I wrong. I was sitting in my home office, debugging code for a client project, when my phone buzzed. Megan's name flashed on the screen. Nothing unusual there. She often called during her lunch breaks from her HR manager position at a local marketing firm. "Hey, babe," I answered, not looking up from my dual monitors. "Ethan?" Her voice sounded different, colder, more distant. "I need to talk to you about something important." That's when I heard them, the unmistakable sounds of her friends in the background, Emily's shrill laugh, Sophie's gossipy whisper, and Erin's condescending snort. The unholy trinity of neighborhood drama queens who spent their days judging everyone else while pretending their own lives were picture perfect. "Are you at lunch with the girls?" I asked, finally giving the call my full attention. "Yes, and they're here for moral support," Megan said, her voice gaining strength. "Ethan, I want a divorce." The words hit me like a freight train, but what came next was worse. I heard Emily's voice clearly through the speaker. "Good for you, Megan. You deserve so much better than that boring computer nerd." Sophie chimed in. "Seriously, when was the last time he took you somewhere nice? My husband, Dan, just bought me a new Mercedes." Erin added her 2 cents. "At least you'll finally be free to find someone who appreciates you. Someone more exciting." They were all laughing now, treating my marriage's death like entertainment at their weekly brunch gathering. But here's the thing about being an IT guy. We notice patterns. We see connections others miss. And over the past year, I'd noticed some very interesting patterns in my wife's behavior and her friends' marriages. "Emily," I said, my voice cutting through their laughter like a knife. "You're laughing pretty hard for someone whose husband Jake has been spending an awful lot of late nights at the gym with my wife." The laughter stopped immediately. "What are you talking about?" Emily's voice cracked. "Oh, those Tuesday and Thursday evening personal training sessions that started about 6 months ago. Funny thing is, Jake's gym buddy Marcus mentioned he never sees Jake there on those nights, but I've seen his truck parked at the Riverside Motel on Elm Street." I heard Megan hiss, "Shut up, Ethan," but I was just getting started. "And Sophie, since we're talking about appreciation, does Dan know about those afternoon shopping trips with Megan? The ones where you both come home with nothing but alibis and the same guilty expressions?" "You're insane," Sophie sputtered, but her voice betrayed her panic. "Erin, your Matt's been awfully helpful with Megan's car troubles lately. 3 times in the past month, if my count is correct. That's either the worst luck with automobiles in history or the most convenient excuse for afternoon hookups." The silence on the other end was deafening. I could practically hear their hearts pounding through the phone. "You have no proof of anything," Megan finally said, but her voice had lost all its earlier confidence. "Actually, I do. See, being married to an IT guy has its perks. Shared Google calendars, location tracking, credit card statements, cell phone records. It's amazing what you can piece together when you know where to look." That was a bluff, mostly. I hadn't done any illegal hacking or surveillance, but I had been paying attention. The late-night texts, the secretive phone calls, the sudden interest in going to the gym, the new lingerie I'd never seen, the way she'd started dressing up for girls' nights that seemed to happen more and more frequently. "I should have started a punch card," I continued, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "Every time one of your friends' husbands needed help in the garage or had to fix something at Megan's house while I was at work. Jake, Dan, Matt, you've been busy, haven't you, honey?" "Stop it right now," Megan screamed into the phone. But I could hear the chaos erupting in the background. Emily was demanding answers from someone, probably Megan. Sophie was crying. Aaron was shouting something about lies and betrayal. "Ladies," I said, my voice calm and steady, "I think your moral support just turned into an intervention. Megan, we'll talk when you get home. And girls, you might want to have some conversations with your own husbands tonight." I hung up and sat back in my chair, my hands shaking slightly from the adrenaline. 12 years of marriage, gone in a 10-minute phone call. But if Megan thought she could humiliate me in front of her friends and walk away clean, she had another thing coming. I opened my laptop and navigated to our shared Google account. There it was, Megan's calendar, which she'd never bothered to make private. Color-coded entries that suddenly made perfect sense. Gym, E on Tuesday nights, shopping, S on Wednesday afternoons, car, M on Thursday evenings. Emily, Sophie, Matt. She'd been scheduling her affairs like business meetings. My phone buzzed with a text from my best friend Phil. "Dude, Emily just called Jake screaming about cheating. What's going on?" I typed back, "Long story. Come over tonight after the girls are asleep. Bring beer. Lots of beer." The front door slammed so hard it shook the house. Megan was home, and from the sound of her heels clicking angrily across the hardwood floor, she was furious. "Ethan!" she shouted from downstairs. "Get down here right now!" I saved my work, closed the laptop, and headed downstairs to face the music. But as I walked down the stairs, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Control. For the first time in our marriage, I held all the cards. Megan was pacing in the living room, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. Her designer handbag was thrown carelessly on the couch, and her usually perfect hair looked disheveled. "How dare you embarrass me like that in front of my friends?" she screamed as soon as she saw me. "Embarrass you?" I laughed, genuinely amused. "Megan, you just announced you wanted a divorce on speakerphone while your friends mocked me. But I'm the one who embarrassed you? You had no right to say those things. You made me look like some kind of cheater? Because that's what you are, isn't it?" She stopped pacing and glared at me with pure hatred. "Prove it." I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of her calendar. Tuesday night, October 15th, Gym, E. That's the night you came home at 10:30 claiming you had a great workout, but you weren't sweaty and your gym bag was bone dry. Her face went pale. Wednesday afternoon, October 23rd, shopping, S. You and Sophie's 3-hour shopping trip that resulted in 0 purchases but somehow required you to shower and change clothes when you got home. "That doesn't prove anything," she whispered, but the fight was going out of her voice. Thursday evening, November 7th. Car, M. Matt's emergency car repair that somehow took 4 hours and left you smelling like cologne that definitely wasn't mine. I scrolled through more photos. Should I continue? Because I've got 6 months of this, Megan. 6 months of coded entries, convenient alibis, and 3 of your best friend's husbands. She collapsed onto the couch, her head in her hands. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. What wasn't supposed to happen? Getting caught? Or falling for 3 different men at the same time? It started innocently. Jake was helping me with my workout routine. Dan was giving me advice about trading in my car. Matt was just being friendly when he offered to help with that electrical problem in the garage. And somehow that turned into scheduling regular hookups with all 3 of them? She looked up at me with tears in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. Not after what she'd put me through. Not after the humiliation of that phone call. "You don't understand," she said. "You're always working. You never pay attention to me anymore." I felt invisible. "So you decided to become very visible to half the married men in our neighborhood?" "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Megan? Help me understand how my wife ended up scheduling affairs like business meetings." She was quiet for a long moment, and I thought she might actually try to explain herself. Instead, she stood up and straightened her shoulders, trying to regain some dignity. "I want you out of this house," she said coldly. I laughed, actually laughed, at her audacity. This is my house too, Megan. My name's on the mortgage, my money paid for half of everything in it, and my daughters live here. I'm not going anywhere. Then I'll take the girls and leave. With what money? Your credit cards are maxed out from all those shopping trips, and I'm pretty sure your job is about to become very complicated when your boss finds out you've been having affairs with clients' husbands during work hours. Her face went white. How did you— Jake's gym is a client of your company. Dan's car dealership sponsors your company's softball team. Matt's investment firm handles your company's 401k. It's a small world, Megan, and you've been mixing business with pleasure in ways that could get you fired. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. Who are you? This isn't the man I married. You're right, I said, walking toward the stairs. The man you married was a pushover who worked 60 hours a week to pay for your lifestyle while you screwed around behind his back. Consider this my resignation from that position. I was halfway up the stairs when she called after me. This isn't over, Ethan. I paused and looked back at her. You're absolutely right. It's not over. It's just beginning. The next morning started with a bang. Literally. Someone was pounding on my front door at 7 a.m., and it wasn't the mailman. I stumbled downstairs in my pajamas, expecting to find Megan's lawyer or maybe one of her angry friends. Instead, I found Emily standing on my doorstep, mascara streaked down her cheeks and fury radiating from every pore. We need to talk, she said, pushing past me into my house without invitation. Good morning to you too, Emily. Coffee? Cut the crap, Ethan. Is it true? About Jake and Megan? I studied her face. Emily had always been the ringleader of Megan's little group, the one who organized their girls' nights and weekend getaways. She was also the one who'd laughed the hardest during yesterday's phone call, calling me a boring computer nerd. Now she looked like she hadn't slept all night. What did Jake tell you? I asked, genuinely curious. He denied everything, of course. Said you were just trying to cause trouble because you're angry about the divorce. But then I started thinking about all those late nights, all those times his story didn't quite add up. She followed me into the kitchen, where I started making coffee with deliberate slowness. Let her sweat a little. I checked his phone last night while he was sleeping, she continued. Found deleted text messages, fragments of conversations about meeting times and places. And what did those fragments tell you? That my husband has been cheating on me with my best friend for at least 6 months. Her voice broke on the last word. I poured 2 cups of coffee and handed her one. I'm sorry, Emily, I really am. But you should know, it's not just Jake. What do you mean? Megan wasn't just seeing your husband. She was also having affairs with Dan and Matt. Emily's coffee cup slipped from her hands and shattered on the kitchen floor. Sophie and Aaron's husbands? All 3 of them? All 3 of them. Your best friend was sleeping with all of your husbands, and you 3 were sitting there yesterday mocking me for being boring. She stared at the broken ceramic scattered across my floor, her face cycling through emotions, shock, anger, betrayal, and finally, a cold determination I'd never seen in her before. That bitch, she whispered. Emily. That manipulative, husband-stealing bitch. She looked up at me with fire in her eyes. Do Sophie and Aaron know? Not yet, but they will soon enough. How can you be so calm about this? Your wife cheated on you with 3 different men. I leaned against the counter and took a sip of my coffee. Because I'm not the victim here, Emily. I'm the guy who figured it out first. There's a difference. She studied my face like she was seeing me clearly for the first time. You have a plan, don't you? I have several plans. I want to help. That surprised me. Why? Because Megan didn't just betray you. She betrayed all of us. She sat there every week listening to us talk about our marriages, our problems, our insecurities, and the whole time she was sleeping with our husbands. She made fools of all of us. I grabbed some paper towels and knelt down to clean up the broken coffee cup. Emily knelt beside me, helping gather the larger pieces. What do you want to do? I asked. I want her to pay. I want them all to pay. Revenge is a dish best served cold, Emily. Are you sure you're ready for what that means? She looked at me with steel in her eyes. Try me. Over the next hour, Emily and I laid out everything we knew. She provided details about the girls' nights that had seemed suspicious, times when Megan had disappeared for hours, phone calls she'd stepped away to take, the way she'd been dressing differently lately. I shared what I'd discovered through careful observation and pattern recognition. There's something else, Emily said, as we finished our second pot of coffee. Megan's been pushing all of us to be more adventurous in our marriages, suggesting we spice things up, try new things, be more open-minded. What kind of things? She kept talking about how boring monogamy was, how we were all too young to be tied down to one person forever. She even suggested we should all go on a couples retreat together, all 4 couples. The pieces clicked into place in my mind. She was setting up a situation where she'd have access to all your husbands in one place. Jesus Christ. Emily put her head in her hands. She was planning something bigger, wasn't she? This wasn't just about affairs. She was planning to break up all our marriages. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another, then a third. All from unknown numbers, but I had a pretty good idea who they were from. The first message read, "This is Dan. We need to talk. Sophie is asking questions I can't answer." The second, "Ethan, this is Matt. Aaron found something on my computer. Call me." The third was from Jake. "Your wife is crazy and your accusations are bullshit, but Emily won't stop crying. Fix this." I showed the messages to Emily, who read them with growing satisfaction. "They're panicking," she said. "Good. Panic makes people sloppy. What's our next move?" I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at our quiet suburban neighborhood. Kids were walking to school, neighbors were leaving for work, and everything looked perfectly normal. But underneath that veneer of normalcy, 3 marriages were about to implode, and the woman I'd loved for 12 years was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the boring computer nerd. First, we let them panic for a while, let them make mistakes. Then we start gathering evidence, real evidence, that will hold up in divorce court. What kind of evidence? Financial records showing unexplained expenses, hotel receipts, phone records, credit card statements, the kind of evidence that makes divorce lawyers smile. Emily grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all morning. "I like the way you think." "There's one more thing, Emily. Once we start down this path, there's no going back. Your marriage to Jake is over. Sophie's marriage to Dan is over. Aaron's marriage to Matt is over. Are you prepared for that?" She was quiet for a long moment, staring out the window at the neighborhood where we'd all lived as friends and neighbors for years. "My marriage was over the moment Jake decided to cheat with my best friend," she said finally. "I just didn't know it yet." "Then let's get to work." The rest of the morning was spent planning. Emily knew details about Sophie and Aaron's schedules, their habits, their weaknesses. I knew about technology, about how to gather information legally, about how to document everything in ways that would be useful later. We were interrupted by another knock at the door. This time it was Phil, my best friend, and the only person in this whole mess I trusted completely. "Dude," he said as soon as I opened the door, "the whole neighborhood is talking. Emily's car has been in your driveway for 3 hours, and Jake is driving around looking for her like a crazy person." "Come in," I said, stepping aside. "You need to hear this." Phil listened with growing amazement as Emily and I explained the situation. When we finished, he sat back in his chair and whistled low. "Holy shit, Ethan. Your wife was running a one-woman wrecking crew on the entire neighborhood." "It gets better," Emily said grimly. "Show him the calendar." I pulled up the photos on my phone and handed it to Phil. He scrolled through them, his expression growing more incredulous with each image. "She scheduled this stuff? Like appointments?" "Color-coded by husband," I confirmed. "That's either the most organized cheating in history or the sign of a seriously disturbed person. Probably both, Emily said. Phil handed me back my phone. So what's the plan? And don't tell me you don't have one, because I know that look. I glanced at Emily, who nodded encouragingly. We're going to let them destroy themselves, I said, but we're going to help the process along. How? By making sure the truth comes out in the most public, humiliating way possible. Phil grinned. Now you're talking my language. What do you need me to do? For now, just keep your eyes and ears open. This neighborhood is about to become very interesting. As if on cue, my phone rang. Megan's name flashed on the screen. Should I answer it? I asked Emily. Put it on speaker, she said. I want to hear this. I answered the call and immediately put it on speaker. Hello, Megan. Ethan, what have you done? Emily won't answer her phone, Sophie is crying, and Erin just called me screaming about how I've ruined her life. I haven't done anything, sweetheart. I just told the truth. You had no right to tell them about your affairs with their husbands. I had every right. They're my friends too, Megan. Or they were, before you decided to sleep with their husbands. Emily was grinning wickedly, clearly enjoying hearing Megan squirm. This is all your fault, Megan screamed into the phone. If you had been a better husband, none of this would have happened. You're right, I said calmly. If I had been a better husband, I would have noticed sooner that my wife was cheating on me with half the neighborhood. I would have protected my friends from your lies. I would have saved everyone a lot of pain. That's not what I meant. I know exactly what you meant, Megan. You meant that it's my fault you chose to have affairs instead of talking to me about problems in our marriage. You meant that it's my fault you chose to betray not just me, but 3 of your closest friends. You meant that somehow I'm responsible for your choices. There was silence on the other end of the line. But here's the thing about choices, Megan. They have consequences, and you're about to learn what those consequences look like. Are you threatening me? I'm promising you. You wanted a divorce? You'll get one, but it's going to be on my terms, not yours. I hung up and looked at Emily and Phil, who were both staring at me with something approaching awe. Damn, Ethan, Phil said. Remind me never to piss you off. Emily was already standing up, grabbing her purse. I need to go talk to Sophie and Erin. They need to hear the truth from me before Megan gets to them with her version of events. Good idea. But Emily? She turned back to me. When you talk to them, remember, we're not the bad guys here. We're just the ones who figured out the truth first. She nodded and headed for the door. I'll call you later. After she left, Phil and I sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes. You know this is going to get ugly, right? He said finally. It's already ugly. Now it's just going to be public. Are you sure you want to do this? I mean, Megan's still the mother of your kids. I thought about Lily and Ava, probably at school right now with no idea that their family was falling apart. They were the one part of this whole mess that broke my heart. That's exactly why I have to do this, Phil. My daughters deserve to know the truth about their mother. Not now, maybe not for years, but someday. And when that day comes, I want them to know that their father fought for what was right. Phil nodded slowly. Then let's make sure we do this right. By Thursday evening, the neighborhood felt like a powder keg waiting for a spark. Emily had spent 2 days systematically destroying Megan's carefully constructed lies, armed with evidence I'd helped her gather and a fury that burned hotter with each new revelation. Sophie had confronted Dan, who'd broken down and confessed everything. Erin had hired a private investigator who'd confirmed Matt's affairs within 24 hours. The explosion came at the Riverside Elementary School fundraiser. I arrived at the school gymnasium with Lily and Ava, both girls excited about the carnival games and bake sale. They had no idea their family was at the center of the biggest scandal to hit our suburban neighborhood in years. I intended to keep it that way, at least for tonight. Daddy, can we get cotton candy? Ava asked, tugging on my hand as we walked through the decorated gymnasium. Of course, sweetheart, but let's find your mom first, okay? That turned out to be easier than expected. Megan was standing near the ring toss game, surrounded by a small group of parents who were clearly gossiping. From their body language and the way they kept glancing around nervously, I could tell they were discussing the recent drama. "There's Mommy," Lily said, starting to run toward Megan. "Wait," I said, catching her hand. Something about the scene ahead didn't look right. Megan was talking animatedly to the group, her hands gesturing dramatically. I couldn't hear what she was saying from across the gymnasium, but I could see the reactions of the people listening to her. Some looked shocked, others skeptical, and a few were clearly uncomfortable. "Stay close to me, girls," I said, leading them toward the cotton candy stand instead of directly to Megan. That's when I saw Emily enter the gymnasium with her 2 kids. She scanned the room until she spotted Megan, and her expression went cold. Sophie and Aaron weren't far behind, both looking like they'd rather be anywhere else in the world. The confrontation started before I could get my daughters safely out of range. "Megan!" Emily's voice cut through the noise of the carnival like a knife. The group around Megan scattered immediately, sensing trouble. Megan turned to face Emily with a fake smile plastered on her face. "Emily? I was just telling everyone about the misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Emily's voice was getting louder, drawing attention from across the gymnasium. "Is that what you're calling it?" I quickly steered Lily and Ava toward the book sale table, which was run by Mrs. Henderson, a sweet, elderly woman who'd taught Sunday school for 30 years. "Mrs. Henderson," I said quietly, "could you keep an eye on the girls for a few minutes? I think there might be some adult drama happening that they don't need to see." She looked over at the growing commotion near the ring toss and nodded knowingly. "Of course, dear. Girls, would you like to help me organize these books?" I made my way closer to the confrontation, staying far enough back to avoid getting pulled in, but close enough to intervene if things got out of hand. "You've been telling people that Ethan made everything up because he's bitter about the divorce," Emily was saying, her voice carrying clearly across the gymnasium. "That he's spreading lies to hurt you." "He is spreading lies," Megan replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "Really? So Jake didn't confess to me Tuesday night? Dan didn't break down crying when Sophie confronted him? Matt didn't beg Aaron for forgiveness yesterday?" The crowd that had gathered around them was growing larger. I spotted several parents I knew, all watching with the fascination people reserve for car accidents and reality TV shows. Sophie stepped forward, her face blotchy from crying. "Megan, how could you do this to us? We were supposed to be friends." "We are friends," Megan protested. "This is all just a big misunderstanding that got blown out of proportion." "A misunderstanding?" Aaron's voice was shaking with rage. "I found the hotel receipts, Megan. The same hotel where you and Matt have been meeting every Thursday for 6 months. The same hotel where you met Jake on Tuesdays and Dan on Wednesdays." The crowd around them had gone completely silent. I could see phone cameras being raised discreetly, people recording what was clearly going to be the most talked about moment in our school's history. Megan's fake composure finally cracked. "You don't understand. None of you understand what it's like to be married to someone who doesn't see you, who doesn't appreciate you." "So you decided to steal our husbands?" Sophie's voice was getting shrill. "You decided to destroy our families because you were unhappy?" "I didn't steal anyone. They came to me." The words hung in the air like a confession. Emily stepped closer to Megan, her voice dropping to a deadly whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the gymnasium. "They came to you because you seduced them. You planned this, Megan. You systematically went after our husbands while pretending to be our friend. You sat with us every week, listened to us talk about our problems, our insecurities, and you used that information to manipulate our husbands." "That's not true." "Show them the calendar, Ethan." All eyes turned to me. I hadn't intended to get involved, but Emily had just thrown me into the center of the confrontation. I pulled out my phone and opened the photos I'd taken of Megan's calendar. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice carrying clearly in the silent gymnasium, "I present Megan's affair schedule, color-coded by husband." I held up my phone so the crowd could see the screen. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathered parents as they processed what they were looking at. Tuesday nights, Jake. Wednesday afternoons, Dan. Thursday evenings, Matt. 6 months of scheduled infidelity, organized like business meetings. Principal Martinez appeared at my elbow, clearly uncomfortable with the drama unfolding at his school fundraiser. Folks, maybe we should take this outside. No, Megan said, her voice suddenly strong and defiant. Let's finish this here in front of everyone, since that's what you all want. She turned to face the crowd, her chin raised defiantly. Yes, I had affairs. Yes, I was seeing Jake and Dan and Matt. But you know what? I'm not sorry. The silence was deafening. I spent 12 years married to a man who treated me like furniture, who came home from work, ate dinner, and disappeared into his computer, who never took me anywhere, never surprised me, never made me feel special or wanted or desired. She pointed at me accusingly. Ethan is a good provider and a decent father, but he's a terrible husband. He's boring and predictable and emotionally unavailable. So yes, when other men showed interest in me, when they made me feel beautiful and wanted, I responded. By destroying their marriages too? Emily shot back. Their marriages were already broken. Jake told me he hadn't been happy with Emily in years. Dan said Sophie was cold and controlling. Matt complained constantly about how Aaron never wanted to do anything fun. So you decided to help them cheat instead of encouraging them to work on their marriages? I decided to be happy for once in my life. The crowd was riveted. This was better than any soap opera, and it was happening right here in their children's elementary school gymnasium. I stepped forward, my voice calm and measured. Megan, you're absolutely right about one thing. I wasn't a perfect husband. I did work too much. I did take you for granted sometimes. And I'm sorry for that. She looked surprised by my concession. But here's what I don't understand, I continued. If you were so unhappy, why didn't you talk to me? Why didn't you suggest counseling? Why didn't you ask for a divorce before you started sleeping with half the neighborhood? Because, she started, then stopped. Because this was never about being unhappy, was it? This was about power. About proving you could take any man you wanted, even if he belonged to one of your friends. That's not true. Then explain the calendar, Megan. Explain why you scheduled your affairs like appointments. Explain why you chose your 3 best friends' husbands instead of strangers. Explain why you kept detailed records of your cheating. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. Emily stepped forward again. I'll explain it. She's a narcissist who got off on the power of manipulating all of us. She enjoyed sitting with us every week, listening to us worry about our marriages, knowing she was secretly destroying them. You're wrong, Megan screamed, finally losing all composure. You're all wrong. I loved them. I loved Jake and Dan and Matt, and they loved me too. All 3 of them? Sophie asked incredulously. You loved all 3 of them at the same time? Yes. Why should I have to choose? Why should any of us be limited to one person for our entire lives? It's not natural. The crowd was murmuring now, clearly shocked by Megan's defense of her actions. So your solution was to lie to everyone? Aaron asked. To sneak around behind our backs? To make fools of all of us? My solution was to be happy. By making everyone else miserable, I said quietly. Megan turned to me with tears streaming down her face. I never meant for it to happen like this. I never wanted to hurt anyone. But you did hurt people, Megan. You hurt me. You hurt Emily and Sophie and Aaron. You hurt Jake and Dan and Matt. And most of all, you hurt our daughters. The girls don't know anything about this. They will. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday they'll be old enough to understand why their parents got divorced. And when that day comes, what are you going to tell them? She stared at me with a mixture of hatred and desperation. I'm going to tell them that their father was too busy with his computers to notice when their mother was drowning. and I'm going to tell them that their mother chose to have affairs instead of fighting for her marriage. Principal Martinez stepped between us. Okay, that's enough. This fundraiser is supposed to be about the children, and there are kids present who don't need to hear this. He was right. I looked around and saw several children watching the confrontation with wide eyes, including some of Lily and Ava's classmates. You're absolutely right, Principal Martinez. This conversation is over. I turned to walk away, but Megan grabbed my arm. This isn't finished, Ethan. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. Yes, it is. Your affairs are public knowledge now. Your friendships are destroyed. Your marriage is over. What else is there to finish? The divorce, custody, the house, our life. I gently removed her hand from my arm. Megan, our life ended the first time you scheduled an affair in your calendar. Everything else is just paperwork. I walked away from her, collected my daughters from Mrs. Henderson, and left the fundraiser. But as we drove home, I could see in my rearview mirror that the confrontation was still going on in the school parking lot, with Emily, Sophie, and Aaron surrounding Megan like a pack of wolves circling wounded prey. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and 43 text messages. The story of the fundraiser confrontation had spread through social media overnight, complete with video clips and screenshots of Megan's affair calendar. My quiet suburban neighborhood had become ground zero for the most public marital implosion in recent memory, and I was right in the center of it. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was exactly where I needed to be. The aftermath of the school fundraiser confrontation spread through our neighborhood like wildfire. By Saturday morning, I counted no fewer than 6 cars driving slowly past my house, their occupants craning their necks to get a glimpse of the man whose wife had been caught scheduling affairs like business meetings. I was drinking coffee on my front porch, deliberately visible, when Jake's pickup truck pulled into my driveway. He climbed out looking like he'd aged 10 years in the past week, unshaven, hollow-eyed, and wearing the same clothes he'd probably slept in. "We need to talk," he said, walking up my front steps without invitation. "Good morning to you too, Jake. Coffee?" "Cut the shit, Ethan. You've destroyed my marriage." I took a slow sip of my coffee and studied his face. Jake had always been the neighborhood alpha male, 6 feet tall, muscular from his gym ownership, confident to the point of arrogance. The man standing on my porch looked broken. "I destroyed your marriage? That's interesting, because from where I sit, you destroyed your marriage when you started sleeping with my wife. Megan came on to me, she pursued me, and you had no choice but to go along with it?" He ran his hands through his unwashed hair. "You don't understand. Emily and we've been having problems for years. We barely talk anymore. We haven't been intimate in months. Megan made me feel alive again. So you decided to have an affair instead of working on your marriage or getting a divorce. It wasn't supposed to be an affair. It was supposed to be, I don't know, just something to make me feel better about myself." I stood up and walked to the porch railing, looking out at our quiet street. "Jake, do you know what the difference is between you and me?" "What?" "When I was unhappy in my marriage, I worked longer hours and buried myself in my computers. When you were unhappy in yours, you buried yourself in my wife. One of those choices hurt only me. The other hurt everyone. I never meant for it to go this far. How far did you think it would go? Did you think you could keep sneaking around forever? Did you think Emily would never find out?" He slumped against my porch railing. I thought maybe Megan would leave you, and Emily would never have to know." "And then what? You'd divorce Emily and marry Megan?" "Maybe. I don't know. I wasn't thinking clearly." "No, you weren't. Because if you had been thinking clearly, you would have realized that a woman who cheats with you will cheat on you." He looked up at me sharply. "What do you mean?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the calendar photos again. "Jake, you were Tuesday nights. Dan was Wednesday afternoons. Matt was Thursday evenings. Did you really think you were the only one?" His face went white as he stared at the screen. She told me she was leaving you for me. She said I was the only one who understood her. She told all three of you the same thing. Jake's legs gave out and he sat down hard on my porch steps. Jesus Christ, she was playing all of us. Congratulations, you're finally catching on. We sat in silence for several minutes. I could see neighbors peeking out their windows, probably wondering what Jake and I were discussing so intensely. Emily filed for divorce yesterday, he said finally. I'm sorry to hear that. Are you? Because you're the one who told her about the affair. Jake, I told Emily the truth. What she did with that information was her choice. She's taking everything. The house, the gym, the kids. She says I can have supervised visitation until I prove I'm not a morally corrupting influence on our children. That sounds about right. He looked at me with a mixture of anger and desperation. How can you be so calm about this? Your wife was cheating on you too. Because I'm not the victim here, Jake. I'm the guy who figured out what was happening and put a stop to it. By destroying 4 marriages, by exposing the truth, Megan destroyed 4 marriages. I just made sure everyone knew about it. My phone buzzed with a text message, then another. I glanced at the screen and saw messages from Dan and Matt, both asking to meet with me. Looks like you're not the only one who wants to talk, I said, showing Jake the messages. They're probably going through the same thing I am. Emily called Sophie and Aaron after she filed for divorce. Gave them copies of all the evidence you helped her gather. Good for Emily. Jake stood up slowly, looking older and more defeated than when he'd arrived. What happens now? Now you deal with the consequences of your choices. You find a lawyer, you figure out how to rebuild your relationship with your kids, and you try to become a better person. And Megan, what happens to her? I thought about that question. Megan had lost her 3 best friends, her lovers, and soon her husband. Her reputation in the neighborhood was destroyed, her social circle had evaporated, and her carefully constructed life was in ruins. Megan gets exactly what she chose, I said finally. She chose to have affairs instead of working on her marriage. She chose to betray her friends instead of being honest with them. She chose to schedule her cheating like business meetings instead of dealing with her problems like an adult. Now she gets to live with those choices. Jake nodded slowly and walked back to his truck. As he was getting in, he turned back to me. For what it's worth, Ethan, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I slept with your wife. I'm sorry I betrayed Emily. And I'm sorry I helped destroy everything. Apology accepted, Jake. But you need to apologize to the right people, starting with your kids. After he left, I called Dan and Matt and arranged to meet them at Murphy's bar that evening. If we were going to have this conversation, it might as well be somewhere with alcohol. Murphy's was nearly empty on Saturday night, which suited my purposes perfectly. Dan and Matt were already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with beers they'd barely touched. Dan looked like he'd been crying. Matt looked like he wanted to punch someone. Both of them looked up when I approached their table with a mixture of guilt and resentment. Gentlemen, I said, pulling up a chair. I understand you wanted to talk. You son of a bitch, Matt said without preamble. You destroyed my marriage. Actually, Matt, you destroyed your marriage when you started having sex with my wife in cheap motels. I just made sure your wife found out about it. Aaron hired a private investigator, Dan said quietly. He had photos, credit card records, hotel receipts, everything. Good. Now she has what she needs for the divorce. Sophie cleaned out our bank accounts, Dan continued. Took the kids to her mother's house, won't let me see them. That's rough, Dan. Have you talked to a lawyer? What's the point? I cheated on my wife with her best friend. No judge in the world is going to side with me. Matt leaned forward aggressively. This is all your fault, Ethan. If you hadn't opened your mouth, none of this would have happened. You're right, Matt. If I had kept my mouth shut, you could have kept sneaking around with my wife indefinitely. Your wife would have stayed ignorant and miserable. My wife could have kept manipulating all of us, And eventually our kids would have grown up thinking that lying and cheating was normal behavior. That's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. You wanted to have your cake and eat it too. You wanted to cheat on your wife without facing any consequences. Dan looked up from his beer. Did you know? About all three of us, I mean? I suspected. Megan was gone too many nights, too many afternoons. She was dressing differently, acting differently, lying about where she'd been, but I didn't know for sure until I saw her calendar. The calendar, Matt said bitterly. She scheduled us like appointments. That didn't bother you at the time? I thought it was just, I don't know, practical. We both had busy schedules. It never occurred to you that a woman who scheduled affairs might be scheduling more than one? Matt and Dan looked at each other, and I could see the realization dawning on their faces. They really hadn't known about each other. She told me she was leaving you, Dan said quietly. Said she just needed time to figure out how to do it without hurting the kids. She told me the same thing, Matt added. Gentlemen, my wife is a lot of things, but she's not stupid. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was playing all of us, me, you three, and your wives. Why? Dan asked. What did she get out of it? I thought about that question. What had Megan gotten out of her elaborate deception? The sex? The attention? The thrill of manipulating so many people at once? Power, I said finally. She got power. She had 4 men dancing to her tune, and 3 women who trusted her completely. She was the center of everyone's world, and she loved it. Until you figured it out, Matt said. Until I figured it out. We sat in silence for a while, 3 men whose lives had been turned upside down by the same woman. Finally, Dan spoke up. What happens now? I mean, where do we go from here? You figure out how to be better men than you were, I said. You find lawyers, you work out custody arrangements, you try to rebuild relationships with your kids, and hopefully, you learn something from this mess. What about Megan? Matt asked. What about her? Are you going to take her back? Try to work things out? I finished my beer and stood up. Gentlemen, my marriage to Megan ended the moment she decided to schedule her first affair. Everything that's happened since then has just been cleaning up the mess. So you're really going through with the divorce? I'm really going through with the divorce. And unlike your situations, I'm going to win. Because while you 3 were busy having affairs with my wife, I was busy documenting everything. I have evidence of her infidelity, her deception, and her manipulation. I have proof that she's an unfit mother who put her own selfish desires ahead of her children's well-being. Matt's face darkened. You're going to try to take her kids away? I'm going to try to protect my daughters from a mother who thinks scheduling affairs is normal behavior. That's cold, Ethan. That's reality, Matt. Megan made her choices. Now she gets to live with the consequences. I left them at the table and walked out into the cool evening air. My phone was buzzing with notifications, social media posts about the school fundraiser confrontation, text messages from neighbors and co-workers, missed calls from reporters who'd somehow gotten hold of the story. Our private family drama had become public entertainment, and I was right in the center of it. But for the first time in months, I felt like I was in control of my own life. Megan had wanted a divorce. She was going to get one, but not the way she'd planned. She'd thought she could humiliate me, take half of everything I'd worked for, and ride off into the sunset with one of her lovers. Instead, she was about to learn what happened when you underestimated the boring computer nerd. Monday morning brought the kind of chaos that makes suburban legends. I was getting Lily and Ava ready for school when I noticed the news van parked across the street from my house. A perfectly coiffed reporter was standing on the sidewalk, speaking earnestly into a camera while gesturing toward my front door. Daddy, why is that lady talking about our house? Ava asked, peering through the living room curtains. Just some silly grown-up stuff, sweetheart. Let's go out the back door today, okay? I managed to get the girls to school without encountering any reporters, But by the time I returned home, there were 3 news vans and at least a dozen neighbors gathered on my street. Apparently, the story of Megan's affair calendar had gone viral overnight, complete with hashtags like #affaircalendar and #suburbanscandal. My phone had been ringing nonstop since 6 a.m. I'd ignored calls from reporters, talk show producers, and something called the Real Housewives casting department. But I couldn't ignore the call from my lawyer. "Ethan," David Chen said as soon as I answered, "we need to talk. Can you come to my office this morning?" "Is it about the media attention?" "It's about Megan's counterfiling. She's claiming emotional abuse, financial manipulation, and she's asking for full custody of the girls." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "What?" "She filed a restraining order this morning, claiming you've been harassing her and her friends. She's also alleging that you've been monitoring her communications illegally and that you're emotionally unstable." "That's all bullshit, David, you know that." "I know that, but we need to address it immediately. Can you be here in an hour?" "I'll be there in 30 minutes. David Chen's law office was located in a sleek downtown building that screamed expensive legal representation. I'd hired him specifically because he had a reputation for being ruthless in divorce cases, and right now I needed all the ruthlessness I could get. "Sit down, Ethan," David said as soon as I entered his office. "We have a problem." He handed me a thick stack of legal documents. Megan's counterfiling was even worse than he'd described over the phone. She was claiming that I had been emotionally abusive throughout our marriage, that I had isolated her from friends and family, and that I had recently become obsessed with destroying her reputation. "She's also claiming that you hacked into her personal accounts and invaded her privacy," David continued. "Her lawyer is arguing that the calendar evidence should be thrown out because it was obtained illegally. I never hacked anything. The calendar was on our shared Google account." "Can you prove that?" "Of course I can prove it. I have screenshots showing the account permissions." David made a note on his legal pad. "Good. What about the harassment claims? She says you've been encouraging her friends to confront her publicly." "I told Emily the truth about the affairs. What she did with that information was her choice." "And the restraining order?" I read through that section of the filing, my anger growing with each paragraph. Megan was claiming that I had threatened her, that I had been following her, and that she feared for her safety. "This is complete fiction, David. I've barely spoken to her since the school fundraiser." "The problem is, she has witnesses. Emily, Sophie, and Aaron have all given statements supporting her claims." That stopped me cold. "What?" "That's impossible. Emily has been helping me gather evidence against Megan." David's expression was grim. "According to these statements, Emily says you manipulated her into confronting Megan publicly. Sophie claims you threatened to expose embarrassing information about her husband unless she cooperated with your revenge plot. Aaron says you've been systematically destroying the marriages of everyone in your social circle." I stared at the documents in disbelief. "They're lying. They have to be lying." "Why would they lie, Ethan? What would they gain from supporting Megan?" I thought about that question, and slowly the pieces started falling into place. Emily, Sophie, and Aaron had all lost their marriages because of Megan's affairs. Their reputations in the neighborhood were destroyed, their social lives were in ruins, and their children were asking questions they couldn't answer. But if they could paint me as the villain, if they could claim that I had manipulated them into destroying their own marriages, then maybe they could salvage something from the wreckage. "They're trying to rewrite history," I said finally. "They want to make me the bad guy so they don't have to take responsibility for their own choices." "That's a nice theory, but we need to deal with reality. Megan's lawyer is asking for an emergency custody hearing. If the judge grants the restraining order, you could be barred from seeing your daughters until the divorce is finalized." The thought of losing Lily and Ava sent a spike of panic through my chest. "What do? We fight back. Hard. I need you to compile every piece of evidence you have about Megan's affairs: phone records, credit card statements, hotel receipts, witness statements, everything. We're going to prove that she's a serial cheater who's trying to manipulate the legal system. What about the media attention? Is that helping or hurting us? David grimaced. It's a double-edged sword. On one hand, the public sympathy is on your side. The story of the cheating wife with the affair calendar has struck a nerve with people. On the other hand, Megan's lawyer is using the media coverage to argue that you've been publicly humiliating their client. So I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't. Welcome to divorce court. But Ethan, there's something else you need to know. I got a call this morning from a producer at Channel 7. They want to interview you for a segment about infidelity in suburban marriages. Absolutely not. Hear me out. If we do this right, we can control the narrative. Instead of letting Megan's lawyer paint you as an abusive husband, we can show the world who you really are. A devoted father who discovered his wife's betrayal and handled it with dignity. I thought about it for a moment. The idea of going on television to discuss my personal life was horrifying, but David had a point. If I didn't tell my side of the story, Megan's version would be the only one people heard. What would I have to do? A simple interview. Answer their questions honestly, show them the evidence, let them see that you're a reasonable person who was pushed to his limit. And you think that will help with the custody hearing? I think it will show the judge that you're not the unstable, vindictive man Megan's lawyer is trying to portray. I spent the rest of the morning at David's office, going through every detail of my marriage and Megan's affairs. By the time I left, we had compiled a comprehensive case file that painted a clear picture of Megan's deception and manipulation. The television interview was scheduled for that evening, to be broadcast on the 6 o'clock news. I had 4 hours to prepare for what would either vindicate me or destroy any remaining chance of keeping my daughters. I arrived at the Channel 7 studios at 5 p.m., my stomach churning with nerves. The producer, a sharp-looking woman in her 40s, met me in the lobby. Mr. Doyle, I'm Rebecca Martinez. Thank you for agreeing to do this interview. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to tell my side of the story. She led me to a small studio where cameras and lights were already set up. The interviewer, a local news anchor I recognized from watching the morning show, was reviewing notes at a desk. This is Tom Bradley, Rebecca said. He'll be conducting the interview. Tom stood up and shook my hand. Mr. Doyle, I want you to know that we're going to handle this story with sensitivity. We understand this is a difficult time for you and your family. I appreciate that. We're going to ask you about the affairs, about the calendar, about the confrontation at the school fundraiser. Are you prepared to discuss all of that on camera? I took a deep breath. I'm prepared to tell the truth. The interview lasted 30 minutes, but it felt like hours. Tom asked me about discovering Megan's affairs, about the calendar that had organized her cheating-like business meetings, about the impact on our daughters and our neighborhood. I answered every question as honestly as I could, showing the calendar photos, explaining how I'd discovered the pattern of deception, describing the pain of realizing that my wife had been systematically betraying not just me, but our closest friends. Some people are saying that you handled this situation vindictively, Tom said near the end of the interview, that you deliberately humiliated your wife and destroyed multiple marriages. How do you respond to that? I respond by saying that the truth isn't vindictive, I said, looking directly into the camera. My wife chose to have affairs with 3 different men. She chose to schedule those affairs like business meetings. She chose to betray her closest friends by sleeping with their husbands. I didn't make those choices. I just made sure people knew about them. And now your wife is claiming that you've been emotionally abusive, that you've manipulated the situation for revenge. What's your response to those allegations? My response is that I have 2 daughters who deserve to know the truth about why their parents got divorced. Not today, maybe not for years, but someday. And when that day comes, I want them to know that their father fought for what was right. The interview ended, and I drove home feeling emotionally drained but oddly relieved. I'd told my story, presented my evidence, and let the world judge for themselves who was telling the truth. The segment aired during the 6 o'clock news, and my phone immediately exploded with calls and text messages. Friends, neighbors, co-workers, and complete strangers were reaching out to express support, share similar experiences, or simply comment on the story. But the call that mattered most came at 8 p.m. from David Chen. "Ethan, you need to see the news. Channel 7 just broke a follow-up story." "What kind of follow-up story?" "The kind that changes everything. Turn on Channel 7 right now." I grabbed the remote and flipped to the news station. Tom Bradley was standing outside a downtown hotel, speaking into the camera with barely contained excitement. "This is Tom Bradley with a Channel 7 exclusive. Just hours after our interview with Ethan Doyle aired, we received a tip that led us to the Riverside Hotel, where we discovered something that could completely change the narrative of this suburban scandal." The camera panned to show Megan walking out of the hotel with a man I didn't recognize. Tall, well-dressed, probably in his early 40s. "The woman you see here is Megan Doyle, the same woman who filed a restraining order this morning claiming her husband was emotionally abusive and unstable. The man with her is Dr. Richard Hawthorne, a prominent plastic surgeon who is married with 3 children." I stared at the screen in disbelief. Even after everything that had happened, even after being exposed publicly, Megan was still having affairs. According to hotel records obtained by Channel 7, Mrs. Doyle and Dr. Hawthorne have been meeting at this hotel every Monday evening for the past 2 months. This would mean that Mrs. Doyle was continuing to have extramarital affairs even after her husband discovered her previous relationships, and even after filing for divorce. The camera cut back to Tom in the studio. We attempted to reach Mrs. Doyle for comment, but she was unavailable. However, Dr. Hawthorne's wife issued a statement saying she was shocked and devastated by the revelation and would be filing for divorce immediately. I turned off the television and sat in stunned silence. Megan hadn't learned anything from the destruction of the past week. She'd simply found a new victim and continued her pattern of deception and manipulation. My phone rang. David Chen again. "Did you see it?" he asked. "I saw it." "This changes everything, Ethan. Megan's credibility is completely destroyed. No judge is going to believe her claims about emotional abuse when she's been caught having another affair." "What happens now?" "Now we go on the offensive. I'm filing a motion to dismiss her restraining order and a counter motion for full custody based on her demonstrated pattern of deception and infidelity. You think we can win?" "Ethan, after tonight's news story, I think we can win everything." The emergency custody hearing was scheduled for Friday morning, exactly 1 week after the Channel 7 exclusive that had exposed Megan's latest affair. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters, curious neighbors, and half the suburb, all hungry for the final act of our public collapse. I sat beside David Chen in my best charcoal suit, projecting calm I barely felt. Across the aisle, Megan huddled with Patricia Williams, her sharp-suited lawyer known for bulldozing family court opponents. Judge Margaret Thornton entered at 9 sharp, face stern. "This is an emergency hearing in Doyle versus Doyle regarding custody of the minor children. I've reviewed the filings. This is one of the most troubling cases I've seen in 20 years. She fixed Megan with a level stare. "Mrs. Doyle, you sought a restraining order alleging emotional abuse and emergency custody. Yet since filing, you've been photographed entering and leaving the Regency Hotel with a man not your husband. Explain." Patricia rose. "Your Honor, post-separation relationships are irrelevant to custody." "I disagree," Thornton said. "When a parent claims abuse then exhibits sustained deception, it speaks to credibility and parental fitness." David stood. "Your Honor, we have evidence of Mrs. Doyle's 8-month pattern of infidelity involving multiple partners, directly harming the children's emotional well-being." "Present it." David methodically dismantled Megan's narrative. He displayed her color-coded affair calendar, dates, times, locations treated like business appointments. Credit card statements showed joint funds spent on hotels, dinners, lingerie. He played audio from the girls' phones, Megan coaching them to say I yelled and scared them. He introduced original statements from Emily, Sophie, and Aaron, before Megan pressured them, describing how she'd targeted their husbands. Thornton's expression hardened as she flipped through exhibits. "Mrs. Doyle, is this calendar authentic?" Megan's voice cracked. "Yes, but—" "And these records tie to Mr. Morrison, Mr. Peterson, Mr. Sullivan, and now Dr. Hawthorne this week?" "Yes, but Counselor," Thornton cut in as Patricia tried to object. "Your client claims victimhood while orchestrating simultaneous relationships with 4 men during marriage. That level of organization suggests calculation, not coercion." David added the clincher, recordings of Megan telling Lily to remember Daddy's anger, and Aaron to say she felt unsafe. Legal one-party consent notices had been sent months earlier. Thornton listened, disgust plain. "Mrs. Doyle, coaching children to fabricate allegations in custody matters constitutes emotional abuse." Megan dissolved into sobs. "I just wanted them to understand why we're apart." "By teaching them to lie about their father?" The judge reviewed silently, then spoke. "In 2 decades, I have never seen such clear parental unfitness. Mrs. Doyle's pattern of deception, manipulation, and disregard for her children's stability is shocking." Megan's cries echoed. "Mr. Doyle," Thornton continued, "while I do not endorse the public exposure, I recognize you acted under extreme provocation to shield your daughters." Gavel raised. "Mrs. Doyle's restraining order is dismissed. Temporary full custody is granted to Mr. Doyle. Supervised visitation for Mrs. Doyle pending psychological evaluation and parenting classes. She will vacate the family home within 48 hours. No unsupervised contact until compliance is demonstrated. Appeal denied. Immediate effect." The courtroom erupted, gasps, furious scribbling, excited whispers. Megan wailed, collapsing against Patricia. David gripped my shoulder. "You did it." I barely registered the congratulations. My mind was on Lily and Ava, still at school, unaware their world had just tilted. Megan staggered past, mascara streaked, hatred blazing. "This isn't over," she hissed. "Yes," I said softly. "It is." Outside, reporters surged. "Mr. Doyle, how does victory feel?" "Justice," I answered. The truth finally won. To the question of advice, truth matters. No matter how painful, how humiliating, it's worth fighting for, especially when children are involved. That afternoon, I picked up the girls. Over ice cream, Lily asked the question I'd dreaded. "Are you and Mommy divorcing?" "Yes, sweetheart. Grown-ups sometimes make choices that break families. We can't live together anymore." "Did you do something wrong, Daddy?" Ava whispered. "I made mistakes. I worked too much, missed signs. Mommy made choices too. Now we focus on being good parents apart." "You'll still be our daddy?" "Always." I pulled them close. "I love you more than anything." That night, the house felt different, quieter, safer. I sat on the porch with a beer, watching the neighborhood settle. 3 doors down, Emily's windows were dark. Sophie's for sale sign gleamed under streetlights. The ripple of Megan's choices had touched everyone. My phone lit. Phil. "Saw the ruling. Beer to celebrate?" "Thanks, staying in, enjoying the quiet." And I was. The girls slept soundly upstairs. No more lies lurking, no more coaching calls. Just us, 3 people beginning to heal. Megan had wanted drama, freedom, admiration. She'd gotten exposure, loss, and consequences instead. I finished the beer, checked on the girls one last time, and smiled in the dark hallway. Tomorrow would bring paperwork, therapy, hard talks. But tonight, I was the father who'd fought and won.